Next up, I really want to thank Patty Shoklik for coming back and speaking with us. She's one of our few return speakers, and for agreeing to tackle a topic that I think a lot of us are going to have some interest in, kind of what we know and what we don't know about diet and supplements.
Hi, everybody. Oh, do I just click to advance? Okay. I'm Patty. I'm one of the dietitians at the UC Health Cancer Center, and I'm honored to be back for this year's symposium. And today I'm going to talk about diet and supplements for cancer prevention, myths versus facts. This is a huge topic. We can have a whole symposium just about this. So I'm going to go through things pretty quickly. So I'm sorry if I'm going too quickly. Quick disclosure, I have nothing, no conflict of interest. Okay. Moving along, this graphic from the American Institute of Cancer Research it depicts the top 10 behaviors that we have the most research and evidence to support in terms of what can you be doing in your everyday life to help reduce your risk. These are the top 10 that we know. And a lot of them you can see are diet and nutrition related. I want to draw your attention to the bottom right corner where it specifically says, do not use supplements for cancer prevention. Put a little pin in that. We're going to come back and talk about that again later, but I want you to remember that that's up there. Okay, so what we're going to talk about first are the nutrition related evidence-based things on this slide, things you can be doing. The obligatory obesity slide. So maintaining a healthy weight is really important. Carrying extra weight, especially and particularly around your abdomen, has been linked not only to an increased risk of developing a cancer, but if you do develop a cancer and you're obese, it has been linked to that cancer being more aggressive. And so if you are in a place where you are looking to lose a little bit of weight, losing 1 to 2 pounds per week is considered healthy recommended weight loss. Little caveat here, if you are someone who currently has cancer and is on treatment for a cancer, even if you are overweight or obese, it may not be the right time for you to lose weight. So if that's your circumstance, please talk to your provider or dietitian first before you attempt weight loss if you are currently receiving treatment for a cancer. If you're someone who's in a prevention or survivorship phase of things, then this is a solid recommendation for you. The next recommendation that was up there is having a plant-based diet. Plants, to be specific, are fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. This is different than a traditional Western diet where we tend to make the meat the focal part of our meal. It's kind of the star of the show. And so not to say that you need to give up eating meat. You do not need to be a vegetarian to have a plant-based diet. But think about a little bit of shift in your meal planning. When somebody asks you, hey, what are we having for dinner tonight? Don't you typically say something like chicken, fish, steaks? You answer with the meat that you're going to have. So a plant-based diet, the star of the show, the main portion of the meal are the plants, and the meat is kind of the accompaniment on the side. So think about your plate for dinner. If you can picture your plate in front of you and you draw an X across it, so that you have 4 even compartments. One compartment, meaning 1/4 of your plate, is where your meat, your animal protein should go. 1/4 of your plate is where your grain, starch, hopefully a whole grain, should go. And then the other whole half of your plate should be your vegetables and or fruits. So if you picture that plate in your mind, 3/4 of it is plants and only 1/4 of it is the meat. That is what a plant-based diet looks like, where we're really focusing more on the plants than the animals. A couple of reasons that this is recommended. First of all, fiber intake. There are just countless benefits to having adequate fiber in your diet. And having a diet that's mostly plants is going to help you get there pretty easily, actually. because fiber is found in plants. It's not in animal products. It's not in meat. So the idea of switching to a plant-based diet is really going to help you meet your fiber goals. And then the other thing is plants have these awesome little things called phytonutrients. We really don't know a lot about how they're doing what they're doing, but we know they're doing really good stuff for us. So they are helping to protect our body cells from damage. They help to reduce inflammation, and they help to give us a healthy gut microbiome, which if we click back real quick, I did mention the healthy gut microbiome on this line, but didn't talk about it. We don't have a direct connection of your gut health to cancer risk quite yet. And I say quite yet because that's where the research is pointing us. I was just at a talk this past week on Wednesday where the speaker was discussing how she had looked at the risk of gastric cancer in relation to your gut microbiome health and your fruit consumption. And she was finding that they were correlated. That's, I think, the direction we're heading in. So the phytonutrients can really help us have a healthy gut microbiome. So that's another reason to focus on a plant-based diet. And the biggest thing to know here is that the more variety in your diet, the better you're doing in terms of your phytonutrient intake, because every plant has a different phytonutrient profile. And so the more variety you get in your plants, the more different phytonutrients you're getting. The obligatory physical activity slide. We can just skip that. Moving on to things to avoid. Those were my slides about things to include. Things to avoid. Processed foods. So I'm sure you've all heard this before too, but when I think of what does it mean to eat a processed food, think about, does the food you're eating look anything like the ingredients that it's made up of? Because if the answer is no, then it's a processed food. It's probably something you want to limit your intake of. For example, does a Pop-Tart look anything like a strawberry? Sure doesn't. So maybe that's something you want to think about limiting in your diet. The reason, because when they're processing these foods, they're adding fats, they're adding sugars, there's additives, there's a whole bunch of other stuff being put into the food when they're making it that may or may not be so good for us. And it also just contains extra calories that would go towards potential weight gain when that's not something if that's not something you're wanting to do. Red meat and processed meat. Again, you don't need to be a vegetarian. You can eat red meat. The current recommendations are to limit how much red meat you eat. So red meat is beef, pork, lamb, and all wild game counts as red meat as well. So on no planet would I expect someone to count how many ounces of red meat they're eating in a week. That's a really ridiculous thing to ask of somebody. But if you think about just how often am I eating it, I would say limit to 2 to 3 servings per week, and you're likely going to be within the recommended ounce guideline. And then processed meats, the hot dogs, the bacon, the sausage, the things that we smoke and cure and add all the preservatives to, those are known proven carcinogens. So the idea of limiting the processed meat in your diet to the absolute most extent possible, not eating them at all, is the ideal, but they should really be a very rare part of your diet, not a regular part of your diet. Okay, alcohol. For complete prevention, it's best not to drink any alcohol. But if you are going to drink, I'm sure you've heard drink in moderation. So what moderation means is different depending on who you ask. The World Health Organization, the American Institute for Cancer Research, everybody has a different definition of moderation. So when you look through them, the one thing that they do all have in common is that they don't recommend more than 2 drinks in a day for men and no more than 1 drink in a day for women in terms of prevention. So that's as close to a moderation definition as I could find for you. Sugar sweetened beverages, you don't want to be drinking these because of the empty calories that they provide, because that's going to go towards weight gain. That's, in my opinion, a really simple, easy way to start. So then moving on, those were my slides on the facts. We're not quite to the myths yet. I've got this gray area of not quite fact, but not quite myth that we're going to go through next. So things that may or may not help. Foods with prebiotic effects, they again are going to help feed the healthy gut microbes, the healthy bacteria that's in your gut, because your gut has healthy bacteria and not so healthy bacteria. You want to really encourage the healthy bacteria. So you can do that by giving them the food that they like. So that's what prebiotics are. Prebiotics really are just food for the healthy bacteria that are living in your gut. Your gut is going to take these prebiotic foods and it is going to turn them into butyrate, which is a short chain fatty acid that has shown potential anti-inflammatory and tumor suppressive properties. Soy foods. This is just one of the many areas where we're going to need more research. What the research is showing us right now is that soy foods are either going to be neutral and in some cases they're going to be beneficial. We're not finding that they're going to be a negative downside to soy foods for the vast majority of people. There's a lot of individual differences and there's a lot of nuance to the research on soy. So that's why it gets a little complicated. But like I said, worst case scenario is they're not doing anything good or bad. And the current recommendations around soy foods are to focus on whole soy foods. Things like tofu, edamame, and soy milk are a lot less processed than something like the soy patties and the soy-based replacement meats. Those are more highly processed. So those are going to fall under the category of the processed foods that we talked about earlier to minimize. Flaxseed, again, this is really showing to have either no benefit or a positive benefit. There's really no downside to putting some flaxseed in your diet. It can lower the risk of breast cancer and other cancers. But again, there's limited research here. So for me to say this is definitely going to help, I can't. We need more research for me to be able to say that. But can I say that this is a really safe, easy thing to do? Yes. And then the other, to back up, when I talked about the variety of getting variety in the plants that you're eating, the latest research on that is they recommend that you eat at least 30 different plants in a week. And so depending on where you're at, 30 might sound like a lot, or you could be going, I already do that, piece of cake. I tried it because I'm not going to recommend things that I wouldn't do myself. So I tried it and I counted my plants and it was pretty easy to get to 30. It's not some crazy unreachable number once you start actually paying attention. And again, when you think about the fact that plants includes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. So the reason I bring that up right now is because I was about to say flaxseed is a really easy way to add another plant to your week because you can just stir this into the yogurt you were going to already eat or stir it into something you were already going to have. It goes great into smoothies, things like that. So flaxseed is just a really easy new plant to add in to hit your 30 plant per week goal. Dietary supplements, we're circling back around to them, the little pin in the corner. So they are not recommended as a cancer prevention strategy, but what they are is very useful for specific groups of people who need them for specific reasons. Maybe you have a deficiency, maybe you have malabsorption issues. In that case, you may need supplements. And if that is the case, you should look for USP verified ones. Because in case you don't know, the supplement industry is not very well regulated. And any brand that has the USP verified seal on it is a brand that paid for independent third-party testing to guarantee that the dose and purity are what they're actually writing on the bottle actually matches what's in the bottle. Which is not something every brand does. And so they can say this is 500 milligrams of vitamin C, and nobody's ever checked if that's 500 milligrams of vitamin C. That's perfectly allowed right now. So if you find the brands with the USP verified seal, somebody's actually gone and checked. The brands that I know of, not to plug any specific brand, but Nature Made is all USP verified, as are the Kirkland vitamins at Costco. Okay. Moving on to specific vitamins. This is where things get tricky. So this is why we're in the gray area of may or may not help. Vitamin D from both diet and supplements may reduce the risk of colorectal cancer. Again, may. And then You can also see that some of the evidence is suggesting that low circulating vitamin D levels are associated with increased risk of other cancers. They may help when paired with other treatments to improve your clinical outcomes. And better prognosis is associated with higher vitamin D levels. And vitamin D is just like a really common deficiency in our world. So vitamin D may be one of those supplements that may be a good idea for you. There are lots of supplements that may or may not be a good idea for you. So specifically calcium is a real catch-22 because if you're taking supplements above 200 milligrams a day, you can possibly be protecting against colorectal cancer while simultaneously increasing your risk of prostate cancer. So this is again why we don't recommend supplements as just kind of a general, hey, everybody should take this. B vitamins, they're often recommended for folks that have peripheral neuropathy that they may have developed from chemotherapies they may have received. So when you look at the research around this, like really get into the nitty gritty of the research, they showed that vitamin B1, which is thiamine, did improve patients' peripheral neuropathy symptoms, but vitamin B12, B6, or combinations of the three will only help if you're B12 deficient. So again, may or may not be helpful. High-dose IV vitamin C, this is actually very interesting to me personally. They have some studies coming out that show if you pair it with patients receiving gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel, you could improve survivorship, improve survival length in pancreatic cancer patients. That's definitely something you would want to talk to your provider about. And then there are supplements that increase your cancer risk. So I don't want you guys to think that just because a supplement is out there and on the market that it is doing something good for you, because that is not a guarantee. High doses of beta carotene are associated with increased risk of lung cancer in smokers. And vitamin E, the SELECT trial was a really big trial that showed that taking 400 IUs per day increased prostate cancer risk in men. Okay, so now we're going to move into the myth section of my talk. I've got exactly 1 minute for each of these myths. So sugar and cancer. This is just outdated information. When I'm feeling like probably most of the people in this room have heard somebody tell them sugar feeds cancer, don't have any sugar, it's going to make things worse, it's going to make it spread. That's what we used to think 35-ish years ago. But more recently, we've got a lot of evidence that has very firmly debunked that. So sugar feeding cancer at this point is really definitely a myth and not something you need to worry about. Should you go and eat a whole bunch of sugar? No, because then you're just getting empty calories and that's not good for you and you're gaining weight. Like there's a lot of reasons you shouldn't overdo sugar, but I don't want you to think like, oh, I'm on treatment. If I eat this donut, I'm making my cancer worse. No, that's not the case at all. Vitamin C in cancer. I have a lot of patients who are like, oh, if I take vitamin C to boost my immune system, that's going to help. There is absolutely no research to support that whatsoever. Oral vitamin C and IV vitamin C actually work really differently in our body. And so taking oral vitamin C has no impact and actually could potentially be something you don't want to take when you're on treatment because sometimes vitamin C interacts with some of the chemos and radiations and makes them less effective. So again, the idea of, oh, vitamin C is good for me, I'm going to take it, it might not be. Biotin and hair growth, this one, I am sorry to tell you, there is not an ounce of evidence out there that supports that biotin helps your hair grow or regrow. This came from the fact that if you have, like originally, if you have a biotin deficiency, one of the signs of that deficiency is hair loss. So they gave these folks biotin and their hair grew back. But it's because they were deficient in biotin. It's not because biotin makes your hair grow. So there's nothing to support this out there. What's actually, looking through the research for this, what's actually a better recommendation if you're trying to regrow some hair is rosemary oil. Not eating it, putting it on your scalp. Don't do that. And then last myth I put up here, and again, these are just common ones that I hear from patients all the time. The alkaline diet, this is just straight up nonsense, if I can say that. You can't change your body's pH by eating certain foods. Your body's pH is really tightly managed and regulated by multiple systems in your body. So when you eat something that's acidic or alkaline, your body does things to manage it so that your body's internal pH stays in a safe range. So you can eat all the alkaline foods you want. You're not changing the pH in your body by doing so. And I just have a lot of folks who are really surprised and hung up by that information. Okay. Oh, great. I'm right on time. Here are my references for all of the information I found. And that is the end. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so, so much. If you could go up and Dr. Savati, yeah. And do we have any questions? All righty.
Hi, thank you all for sharing your expertise. I was going to ask actually about the specific parameters around recommendations for physical exercise in terms of modality and intensity.
Maybe I shouldn't have skipped my slide. Sorry. So the minimum recommendations just for general prevention are 150 minutes per week or more of a moderate intensity activity, or 75 minutes per week or more of a high intensity activity. So if you think of walking, that's a moderate intensity. And I'm talking, not going for a stroll, I'm talking moving, but that's moderate intensity. High intensity would be like running or something like that. So if you're a less intense exercise person, 150 minutes per week or more versus the 75.
In the back, go right ahead. Thanks.
You talked about not incorporating as too much red meat in your diet. What about things like whey protein? Does that have the same impact, or is it kind of the whole source red meat that's the issue?
To take like a whey protein supplement, you're talking about for protein?
Yeah, like in a protein shake.
Yeah, that's completely fine. Whey is an animal-based protein source. It doesn't have there are no negative stigmas around the animal-based protein, and there's not really a negative stigma around eating the healthier animal meats, like the leaner meats, like chicken, poultry, fish, things like that. The reason I mentioned it was more to shift the focus. If you're working on a more plant-based diet, the idea of minimizing the meat and getting your protein from other sources. So ideally, you'd be getting some plant-based protein in your diet, some beans, some legumes, all those kinds of really good plant-based proteins. But if you're worried about not getting enough, if you're reducing your meat intake, using a whey-based protein supplement is completely fine. There's no negative effects associated with that.
Go right ahead.
Hi, thanks for your talks. I wanted to ask about GLP-1s and the effect that slows everything going through your system. And so what effect does that have on cancer in your system?
I don't know that we know that yet. I don't have an answer, like a good answer for your question. I just don't know that we've studied that yet. It's a good question, though.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not aware of GLP-1s increasing the risk of cancer. They definitely can slow the motility of GI tract. But in terms of cancer risk in particular, I'm not aware of any data that has shown that.
Let's hope that's not something we see 10 years down the road.
Hi, I might have missed this before, but when you're doing the endoscopy, does that test your small intestines? I thought it just went into your stomach. And then what was the test for pancreatic cancer that you said?
So with upper endoscopy, we can go as far as the first part of the small intestines. Small intestines are 12 to 20 feet long, so we cannot get through all of them. But in regular upper endoscopy, we can get to the first part.
Okay.
If we are scoping someone with Lynch syndrome, we can try to get as deep as we can as well, at least to the end of the duodenum. Sometimes in some people with high risk, we can even use a longer scope to get deep into the end of the duodenum. But that's why your gastroenterologists need to be aware that you have Lynch syndrome so they can also go as deep as they can. In terms of the pancreatic cancer screening, the two main modalities that we use is MRI. It's a special kind of MRI called MRCP, and endoscopic ultrasound, which is similar to the upper endoscopy, but it uses an ultrasound from the inside to take a deeper look at the pancreas.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, so just Miranda, thank you. You mentioned getting fiber from food sources? What about things like psyllium husk? Does that count?
It certainly does. I mean, psyllium husk is a plant-based source of fiber. Ideally, you're getting it from food sources, but if you're having trouble with that, psyllium fiber is actually one of the types of fiber I do recommend if you're gonna supplement fiber. Psyllium is usually my first choice when I suggest a type of fiber to supplement with. So there's certainly nothing wrong with doing that. If your diet is more plant focused, you're very likely going to be able to meet your recommended fiber needs for the day without a supplement. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Hi, just a quick question about nutrition and diet, but what about hydration? Is there a type of hydration to focus on? I know there's like those powder packets. Is there anything specific that would be helpful?
So the best thing to hydrate with is just water. Obviously plain water is ideal. Most people don't really need like an electrolyte supplement unless they're really sweating or doing some really difficult physical activity or it's really hot out. Then in that case, they are helpful to rehydrate you because the electrolytes that are in them are going to help your body absorb more of the fluid. Most people aren't hitting the level of exercise or intensity or duration. I mean, unless it's July and it's 95 degrees, in which case maybe just exercise indoors. But so you really most people don't need those. If you like to have them or you want the electrolytes, then most of those products are really, really similar. The only thing I would mention is just make sure that you look at the sugar content, because if you're going to drink a lot of electrolyte containing beverages and they're all full of sugar, you're probably undoing all the good you just did with exercise by eating a whole bunch of sugar when you're done. So I would just pay attention to that piece.
I'm going to cheat and actually ask two questions, if that's okay. First one is, what's your recommendation around niacinamide? And the second question is, in order to take full advantage of getting some extra vitamin D for deficiencies, do you recommend taking additional vitamin C to help boost the bioavailability of that? Thanks.
My recommendation around niacinamide in regard to... Oh, okay. There isn't a specific recommendation for niacinamide that I'm aware of for skin cancer prevention. Most of the foods we eat in our Western diet are fortified with these things. So you would actually be pretty hard pressed to not be getting enough, because we fortify a lot of foods in this country. And so you're more than likely eating enough in your daily diet. And there's a lot of foods that contain that naturally. So the chances of you needing a supplement for that are pretty darn low. And then as far as vitamin D, you may want to take it with calcium or phosphorus. I don't know that vitamin C specifically increases the bioavailability of vitamin D. I'm not familiar with it having that effect. Yeah, I mean, the supplements you may want to take with vitamin D are more along the lines of potentially calcium or phosphorus. How about fats? Yeah, I mean, it is a fat-soluble vitamin. So when you're eating any food that contains a fat-soluble vitamin, it is advisable to eat it with some fat, because if you don't, you're not going to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins. So yes, But a lot of the foods that contain vitamin D have their own healthy fats in them. So you're probably doing that if you're doing like, you know, egg yolk has its own fat in it. So a lot of the vitamin D foods are solving that problem for you. But if you're going to take the vitamin D supplement, if you're going to take any supplement, you should be taking them with food. That actually increases how well you absorb, because we don't absorb as well from a supplement as we do from our food. So if you're trying to maximize your absorption from the supplements you're taking, you want to take them with something to eat. That actually does increase the bioavailability.
We're going to take one more question from the gentleman in the back. I know you were there first. Sorry, you can find us on the break.
In the question you answered earlier, is liquid IV considered one of those supplements for, what do you call it? Because my daughter likes to take that rather than water because she says it's a treat.
Yeah, it's one of the electrolyte ones that are out there. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, we're gonna break for lunch now. So if you head outside, there should be lunch boxes. If you had a specific dietary restriction, please find that on the side. We're gonna come back here at 1:10. I want to thank our speakers again so much. Round of applause for our speakers. Excellent, excellent talk so far.